Wait.
It's awful.
Oh, is that right? Well, I sure hope somebody picks up that phone. Because I f***ing called it!
Hello everybody and welcome to the inevitable review of Pokémon Scarlet and Violet. As you've already seen, I have indeed predicted the future, as the game is rushed and riddled with bugs and performance issues. Now, granted, it wasn't a particularly hard task to foresee this development. They didn't even have a year between the last mainline release and this entry. But nonetheless, we have a mess of a game on our hands. Now that I've successfully deterred anyone who had hoped for a non-critical, fully positive review, I can tell you this. On a technical side, this game is indeed a mess. But I do have to admit, it can be a pretty fun mess. Let's talk about it. We are not going over the entire story this time, it takes too long and doesn't add much. I'll just give you an excerpt if any situation calls for it. So, let's start with the whole performance thing. It's like the Don fan in the room after all. This game is technically awful. Most likely because they released it like at least half a year too early because of unrealistic holiday season deadlines. Any area with but a puddle of water in it runs on like 5 FPS. Rain will make your next 5 minutes very unpleasant. And you can couple that with incredibly long loading screens, graphic glitches, the free roam camera regularly panning into the ground giving you a nice X-ray vision, the ground malfunctioning in its entirety, or the game just straight up giving up and crashing. Which is quite unusual for non-modded Switch games, by the way. And honestly, that's just scratching the surface. The game can hardly render anything more than 5 meters away from you without removing 90% of its FPS. These windmills are some of my favorite examples here. This also applies to some cutscenes and battles with NPCs looking like LEGO stop-motion animations. And as I've stated before, that is just my side of things. There's a lot more co-op related issues and just glitches in general all over the internet. Some of them annoying, some of them honestly pretty funny. And while I don't generally agree with the whole bad graphics complaint, I will say that the texture and quality of the world itself is pretty bland and unsatisfying. The Pokémon models feel more vivid and improved.
Look at that subtle off-white coloring.
And cities are usually quite cozy as well, but the rest of Paldea is very rough around the edges. And don't go trying to pin this on the Switch here. If you've ever seen or played Xenoblade Chronicles 3 or even Monster Hunter Rise on the Switch, it is very clear to see that the Switch can handle better graphics without catching on fire. And while I am quite annoyed by another mainline game releasing rushed and in an arguably even more glitchy state than the last few,
two-time back-to-back,
this one has a few silver linings. So let's talk a bit about the features that stand out more positively in this new generation. Although, I will warn you now, when an opportunity arises to take a shot at the performance, I will still take it. Gameplay. It is still a mixed bag, but I'll give it some credit here. I absolutely love the open world formula. They took the concept from Legends Arceus and made it even bigger. So now you really can go wherever you want. The game gives you 3 separate paths to follow. One containing the classic gym battles, one dealing with the antagonist Team Star faction, and the Path of Legend, which features boss battles akin to the rulers of Legends Arceus.
Hi, how are you?
And you can do all of them in whatever order you want. For the first time in mainline Pokémon history, we actually can get gym badges in a freestyle order.
Oh no, he's hot!
Important to note though, all of these major encounters will not scale to your current progress. So even though you can barge straight into the final gym after starting your journey, chances are you will have a bad time.
That's bad.
So there is still an intended route to be taken here, which I'm somewhat conflicted about. I would have loved to see the gym leaders adjust their teams based on your badge progress, as was shown in the Pokémon Origins animation, where Brock specifically picks his team based on Red's progress. This could also help with avoiding overleveling, as I've seen people skip a gym by accident, only to then blast through it later with an overleveled Pokémon, which usually isn't quite as fun. But I suppose this scaling would only really make sense for the gyms, and could mess up the routing for the other two paths, so it might get a bit confusing. Aside from these three main objectives, it is also quite entertaining to just explore the world as a whole. While I do think the map design and textures are quite repetitive, there is still a lot of hidden stuff here to find, including rare Pokémon and special locations.
Wow.
But despite the ease of transportation via flying points and your very own mount, you may still run into quite a few more or less impactful issues while traversing Paldea. It's just very confusing to me how Game Freak improved on the general open world concept from Legends Arceus, yet still managed to make getting around the place a bit more tedious than in Hisui. Now, to shift from the world to the Pokémon inhabiting it. Combat feels mostly the same, as it always has in previous games. Power creep is at an all-time high, with crazy new abilities, insane new Pokémon and ridiculous signature moves for half of the Paldea newcomers. Quality of life features make getting a perfect Pokémon ridiculously easy, as IV training, EV training, common health items and natures can all be altered and optimized with just a bit of money. Furthermore, egg moves can just be learned via the picnic feature, so breeding is mostly just a shiny hunting method, or a way of saving money on bottle caps and nature mints. Even Terra types can be altered to your liking. What are Terra types, you ask? Of course, a part of the new generational gimmick of terrestrialization, aka changing your Pokémon to a specific type, completely changing its type matchups while keeping its previous stab bonus alongside its new typing. Due to this new feature, competitive has been wild over the first few weeks, with both VGC and singles seeing crazy teams and ideas. Smogon has already banned a solid handful of Pokémon from OU for being too busted, and VGC now plans to play with an open team sheet rule, as the potential randomness from Terra types shakes up the meta. Goldengo is already one of the most ridiculous Pokémon this gen has to offer, being the only Pokémon able to completely block any hazard removal while still rocking a very respectable offensive presence.
Hey!
Prankster Murkrow is genuinely a very relevant meta Pokémon in VGC. Dragons are running rampant with setup moves, while abusing the surprise effect of terrestrialization, and after a dominant Gen 8 performance, Weavile has now been completely outclassed and replaced by the new Chen Pao. Which gives me tragic flashbacks to the Flygon Garchomp situation. A very turbulent start into a new generation, to say the least. But personally, it's been a pretty fun time so far. Now, let's take a step back from that and take a look at the battles you face during your playthrough. One of the things that immediately annoys me about this game is the removal of set battle style. If you are unaware, this was an option in all previous games that made in-game battles more akin to online battles. Meaning, you do not get the free info about your opponent's next Pokémon and the option to switch out accordingly. And I have honestly no clue why they would take out this option.
Why?
It has no negative effect on casual gamers. It is not the default setting, and you have to go out of your way to activate it. Now, you could tell me just decline it when the switch offer occurs, and that is exactly what I've done for literally every battle in this game. But that's the thing, I had to manually decline it every single time. What's the harm in letting me just turn that off?
Why?
The game's already pretty easy to begin with, you can even access your PC in between Elite Four fights. So why take out an option that is effectively just quality of life for people who want a bit of a more challenging experience?
Well, you got me. By all accounts, it doesn't make sense.
Aside from that nitpick, the fights are usually quite enjoyable, with the open world concept making trainer battles basically optional.
Betrayed.
So you now have complete freedom over how you want to strengthen your team, be it wild Pokemon trainers or even raid battles. And on the note of raid battles, let's talk about those for a bit. Returning in similar fashion from Sword and Shield's Dynamax Dens, we have Terra Raid crystals all over Paldea, allowing you and up to 3 other trainers to take on strong, terrestrialized Pokemon featuring varying Terra types. And I think these have been majorly improved coming from Gen 8. First of all, every trainer has an individual turn now. You don't have to wait for everyone to choose their move and then just look at the turn play out for a minute. You get your move, and the boss gets one or multiple moves per turn. These happen independently from one another, so when you choose your move, your turn starts playing out, and when everyone has finished their part of the turn, the next turn can start. This is just a very nice way of speeding up the encounter, as Sword and Shield raids could take way too long.
Oh my god!
Making the fights based on a time limit, other than a feint limit, also guarantees that you won't be trapped in some awful encounter for the next 7 years. Speaking of the feint consequences, these have also been drastically changed. As mentioned, they don't determine the outcome of the battle directly anymore, but they will still cost you valuable time. Yet in solo raids, Game Freak has made the change that NPC feints don't actually punish you anymore, which is absolutely wonderful if you don't want to rely on randoms online. And while the raids are visually still glitchy as all hell, with damage calculations and online timing being all over the place, I'd still say this is a significant step up from previous iterations of raid encounters. But do take this opinion with a grain of salt, as all types of combat, as well as the rest of the game, still feel slower than they should due to the overly long loading times. Unfortunately, the performance issues really plague every aspect of this game and diminish the quality of the overall experience. Now that should wrap up battles in general, let's move on to my favorite topic, which will probably take the most time here, which is characters and story. Now, when I originally heard that we were getting 3 story paths, I was rather concerned from the get-go.
No! God, please, no! No!
Pokémon has had its ups and downs in storytelling, with my personal peak still firmly placed in Gen 5. Legends Arceus has brought a bit of Mystery Dungeon flair into the mainline games, and has been a positive surprise. But between those two, the journeys from Gen 6 to Gen 8 has been a downhill slope in the narrative department. I am aware that this is a so-called personal opinion, but I really hope that most sentient beings would at least agree with the general consensus that Sword and Shield especially have been a narrative low point.
He said it! He said it!
So, hearing that they would pursue 3 independent stories in a heavily rushed game sounded like a surefire recipe for shallow writing and a boring narrative.
I don't like where this is going.
But I wholeheartedly admit, I was very much so positively surprised to find a pretty diverse and mostly interesting story. The first 3 storylines convey a general mood of adventure, with a good chunk of interesting characters and roadblocks that feel quite relatable and very in touch with the academy school theme the game focuses around. If you're familiar with the Yu-Gi-Oh anime, these first 3 paths give me the comfy but still interesting GX vibes. It is nothing all too serious like Gen 4 or Gen 5, but it is very appropriate for the given setting. The quote-unquote evil team is just a rebellious group of students that has revolted against being bullied, as the teachers had turned a blind eye to their peril previously. Your rival Nemona just wants to have a friend who shares her passion for Pokémon battles and can match her skill. And Arven's journey for the sake of his Pokémon is going for a more emotional route, showcasing a very deep bond between human and Pokémon. You even have a bit of a sim-like feature where you can talk with these characters and your academy teachers over the course of the story progression, which is where some really interesting character traits come out, especially for the teachers that have less screen time. But even the main cast gets some nice follow-up to their original stories there. Nurse Miriam, for example, gets very little screen time during the actual game. Oftentimes, people see her for the first time as an opponent in the post-game Academy Ace tournament. But talking to her reveals how she had somewhat given up on her dream of becoming an actual health teacher after failing the qualification exam multiple times. And after you talk to her about your grand adventure, she becomes inspired to give it another shot, finally succeeding in her endeavor and vowing to start official health classes as soon as the school allows it. Arven manages to find his own path and his own goal for the future. Penny worries if her friends will manage to fit in after returning to school. And Nemona admits that she's felt pretty lonely in her earlier years, as she had no one who could keep up with her passion and always had to hold back during battles for others to even accept her fight requests. She goes on to talk about being saddened by people brushing off her skill in battle as natural talent, even though she practiced very extensively and put a lot of effort into her training. And side note here, I absolutely love Nemona.
You're breathtaking.
I know a lot of people call her crazy, which is fair, but this character trying to be super positive and find someone who she can wholeheartedly share her passion with, while putting her all into what she loves, is just a very relatable and endearing concept to me. And I am also personally annoyed that people always use talented instead of skilled, because even if they mean well, it always feels like there's this undertone trying to imply that. Anyway, that's a pet peeve of mine, but in this case it makes me like the character a lot more. Team Star as a whole, with Penny as its leader, is another very interesting story path, as it is one tackling a very real topic of bullying, while also showing improvement on how these kinds of antagonist teams are handled. In Generation 7 we had a similar situation with Team Skull, being a ragtag band of people trying to escape the unyielding expectations of society. They're not particularly evil, in fact they have rather reasonable motives for what they do, even if committing wrongdoings isn't the right way to solve their issues. However, Sun and Moon handled them like an actual evil team. Whenever they cause trouble, you beat them up and that's about it. Now for evil teams, that makes sense. Trying to reason with a maniac who is hellbent on flooding an entire region, or sacrificing the world as we know it in order to create a new one, is a pretty tall order. But reasoning with someone who's just angry at the world because they've been wronged themselves shouldn't be nearly as problematic. Yet Team Skull never really had that kind of redemption arc. Only
Guzma
has a decent character progression as he realizes that using his power to retaliate against society only causes more grief. Scarlet and Violet do this entire bit way better, as Director Clavel, head of your academy, actually listens to the issues and reasons of Team Star.
How do you do, fellow kids?
And after every fight against the team boss, you get to know more about their reasons and motivations. And at the end of the Team Star path, the director actually has a thought out strategy on how to allow them to keep their team while still bringing the members back into school and preventing any further mischief.
Impressive.
By turning Team Star into a de facto school-backed organization tasked with helping students train actual Pokémon battles in a more practical way than battle studies, they utilize the experience the members have gained during their time as an outcast in order to make a positive and enticing impression on the remaining students. It is a good solution. More importantly, it's an actual solution in the first place.
Yes!
That in itself is already a milestone here. As the characters themselves put it, It's a win-win situation, favoring both parties while combating the original cause of the issue. That is, a well-handled, non-evil antagonist team. Very nice. Now for Arven's story. I do feel like the Path of Legends is the surface level of his story, but it's not bad in any way. Personally, I don't find it to be as emotional as a good chunk of people do. The whole a friend, significant other, relative is deathly ill and I need to go on an adventure to find the miracle cure is a decently common premise, and while I don't think it's poorly executed, I would say it doesn't have as much inherent depth to it as some of the other storylines. Now, the more complex part of Arven's story happens in the final main story segment, The Way Home, focusing on the giant crater in Paldea's center, known as Area Zero. And this is where we go full epic narrative. Enough of this wholesome school stuff, we're gonna need some epic battle scenes and a heroic save the world ending. The crater has it all. Aggressive Pokémon from the future.
Ferocious.
A unique ecosystem, even though it looks basically just like the overworld plains because textures are hard. And lots of crystals.
Ooh. Shiny.
And then you find these research stations and the professor. Oh yeah, I haven't talked about this guy yet. He doesn't show up that often.
Wow.
His name's Turo and he's Arven's dad. He talks to you, but then he starts bugging out, so you investigate how a person can bug out.
You like jazz?
Only to find out he is an AI, because the real one literally died. Which is a first for an official Pokemon professor, by the way. Regardless, the AI trash talks the real professor post-mortem for being a maniac, which is hilarious.
The original professor would say that such destruction is a natural part of life. I may have been created as a copy of the professor, and yet I cannot seem to find the logic in allowing such a tragedy to occur.
And he then asks you to fix the former prof's mess by deactivating the time machine that keeps bringing all of these future Pokemon here, as they threaten to overrun Paldea. So yeah, time machines exist now, Celebi needs a new side job. Now, the AI is part of the time machine system, so in order to shut it down, they'll have to fight you involuntarily due to a security protocol. And my lord, this music and the visuals slap. This is where half of the budget went. After that is done, Arven takes the whole part about his only known family being dead quite well. Penny shows that she truly is the in-game representation for any socially awkward person, and the AI shows once again that it is a better person and a better parent than the actual professor. And then everyone is happy and Ed Sheeran plays. I did make that section a bit more compact in favor of not going too overboard on the story retelling, but it is really just a culmination of the other three paths with a nice narrative climax, adding drama to the more laid-back rest of the game. Now, that should cover the general story aspects and main character cast. Let's talk about some of the characters I don't like, or how some of them are poorly utilized. For example, let's talk about what could very well be the worst champ ever, Top Champion Ghida. Now, Ghida as a character isn't all too interesting in itself. She's hyped up to be the leader of the Paldea League Association, and one of the strongest trainers around. Aside from that, she doesn't have all too many interesting character traits, so you fight your way through the Victory Road story and beat the Elite Four. And then you get to this final encounter, which is actually not the final encounter because Nemona is the final encounter. But you're gonna have to earn your champion title here first. So let's look at the challenge in front of us. She has Espethra, but without speed boost, so it's a pretty weak start. Lumina Crash is cool, but not good enough to balance out the underwhelming rest of this bird. Then comes Go-Goat.
Alright. I said, alright.
She uses the fish, but without its actual signature buff move, so it sucks.
You deny your weapon its purpose.
Avalok is kinda interesting. King Gambit is pretty solid, especially with Supreme Overlord. But it would definitely make more sense to use that last. So if she won't use King Gambit last, her signature has to be an absolute beast, right? Like maybe a Paradox Pokemon from Area Zero, or one of the available pseudo-legends, right? I mean, think about all of the cool ace Pokemon of previous champs. It's a very iconic thing. So it's a rock.
What the hell is even that?
It's a floating rock that is almost specifically designed to be a lead Pokemon. What could possibly compel you to use some rock as your signature? And she's gonna terrestrialize it to rock as well. Not even poison, no, you terrestrialize it to the type with one of the most weaknesses known to man. I have no words for this. Yes, the rest of her team may be better than, say, Diantha, but at least Mega Gardevoir has some class. Also, she mentioned something about not being able to hold back during battle, so I expected some Beast mode or full Passion mode a la Nemona, but she's just very mellow about the whole fight. And that's about all of that. She talks to you a bit more in the post-game, but really there isn't much more to this character. Kind of bland all around. Team and personality. How do you have less interesting personality traits than the guy who's made to be the average boring guy? Oh yeah, speaking of Larry, let's go over gym leaders. I think they're pretty cool as characters, but I'd say they are rather underused. Grusha and Iono are some of my favorite characters in the game, but aside from the original and rematch gym battles, you don't get much of them.
Very sad.
This is fairly common among Pokemon games, but I still really appreciate it when the games make gym leaders more prominent in the world, like Gen 5 did. This is less of a character complaint than me just saying that I would have liked something similar to the Academy Sim system, but with gym leaders. Might be a bit far-fetched though.
I see what you did there.
Alright, that's gone on long enough now, so let's talk about some more minor stuff. General design, sound, and miscellaneous stuff. This is mostly just gonna be rapid fire stuff that I either like or dislike. Mostly self-explanatory stuff. First off, the music is fire. Pokemon's sound design team has always been pretty clutch, but combining that with some Toby Fox magic is an insane mix. No matter how much I rag on the performance of the game, the OST is top tier.
And that's a fact.
Although I still don't like the weird chanting they continued from Sword and Shield. It sounds like drunk people at a soccer game.
Good morning, good.
Also, putting Ed Sheeran over the credits is hilarious. I don't even dislike the song, I just feel like it's really out of pocket. Also, on the topic of sound, we still do not have voice acting, which is pretty detrimental, especially for these more personal storylines. At this point they have to be trolling. They even have language classes in the game, where it's all about listening, but you can't hear them. Yet they added an actual clapping track after like 2 minutes of silence, which makes virtually no sense.
I am confusion.
It's such an odd experience. Similarly to Sword and Shield, it feels very bizarre to see scenes that absolutely look like they should be voiced, but it's just silent. And if you want to really bring it home, there are fan-made dubs on YouTube that are genuinely incredible, and especially add to the intensity of the story ending. The pure refusal to add voice acting feels like a narrative handicap at this point, and I simply don't understand it. They did, however, make some progress in terms of open-minded design. For example, we finally have the buff female NPCs, which is cool. And characters like Grusha and Rika straying from the general design stereotypes.
Am I a boy? Am I a girl? Who knows? But everyone finds me hot and that makes everyone gay.
Well, what does that have to do with me?
No. He's got a point.
Character customization unfortunately suffered a less open-minded approach, as you were permanently forced to wear a school uniform for the majority of your outfit.
Oh, hell no!
You can customize everything else, but shirt and pants are kind of 80% of your visible attire.
That's quite big.
So that's annoying, no drip. And yes, I know you can switch between 4 school outfits, but they're all not great. Especially if you play Scarlet. My condolences for those of you who do. Because you are eternally damned to wear these ridiculous striped pants.
Hell no, man. Are you serious? This is torture.
And why does the player character keep looking younger?
Little baby man.
The whole 10 years old thing hasn't been relevant in years, and there are people of varying age in this academy. So why can't we at least choose to make our character a bit older? Can't even blame Arvin for calling us little buddy. We do look like an elementary schooler next to most of these guys. Feels like the whole theory that everything evolves into crabs. It's just every main character eventually evolves into a chibi. Moving on, why are the future Paradox Pokémon visually robots? The story does tell you that they still have the qualities of biological life forms, so they are more akin to cyborgs, not actual robots.
We call them androids.
Well, good for you, you're wrong.
But how the heck does that work out from the perspective of evolution? They just look completely like robots. They should just have potentially gained a bit more metal armoring due to frequent exposure to it, or futuristic weaponry adopted from the future humanity. I don't see how natural evolution would turn them into Tamagotchis.
Holy Jesus. What is that?
Even Porygon looks more alive, and that thing is literally a program turned into a physical body. Now, on a more positive Paradox note, I do get unexplainable amounts of joy from looking at Great Tusk.
Bitch, I'm adorable.
I've always wanted some more Donphan love, and this guy is perfect. And he is so incredibly... He's like double the height of both other Donphan variants. And I almost forgot to talk about Dunsparce. After 2 full decades, the boy got an evolution. And it adds more Dunsparce. It just turned into a long boy. And unlike Annihilate, it also didn't get particularly good in combat. A bit disappointing, I'd say. And while I generally don't mind it too much...
A bit rich, but okay.
I just want to mention that this guy got approved by the same team that robbed Flygon of its Mega because they couldn't find a good design. Now, I respect having a high standard for Flygon's Mega, yet this development makes me feel like those standards might have dropped a bit over the years. Anyway, this is getting longer than I ever wanted it to be, but I need to talk about the DLC speculations and data mines as well.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you will, look right here.
So, about the DLC. This is gonna be full-on spoiler territory and mostly non-official speculation and data mine stuff. If you want to avoid that, skip this chapter. Also, lore talk. You have been warned. So, the general consensus we have going right now is that a DLC is confirmed and we'll be getting a new legendary Paradox based on either the Swords of Justice or the legendary Beast, depending on your version. But that's the simple part. The more interesting part is that we are most likely going to be exploring part of or a border region to Kalos. The currently grayed out area in the northeastern region of Paldea, which is inspired by real-life Spain, would coincidentally line up with the southwestern border region of France, the inspiration for Kalos. Now, that in itself doesn't say much yet, But if you've seen the Pokemon that have already been data mined to be in the game and available via Pokemon Home, you would have seen some interesting choices. Like the Kalos starter Pokemon, which haven't actually been available in any previous Switch game, and would only be transferable from Pokemon Go. Making them exclusively available through Pokemon Go seems like quite an odd choice.
That's suspicious. That's weird.
Almost as if they are intended to become available in a different manner at some point later.
This is big brain time.
Diancie is also a Pokemon found in the game code, yet transferring it apparently requires you to also transfer a Carbink with it, a crystal Pokemon that can sleep for millions of years and lives with their queen underground in a jeweled kingdom. All quite reminiscent of what we see in Area Zero. This theory is furthered by the Violet book and a research station in Area Zero, mentioning a being clad in hexagon scales, somehow related to Area Zero and the Terrestrial phenomenon. Which might ring a bell with another legend of Kalos, the Order Pokemon Zygarde. After all, the mystery of Area Zero is far from solved. The time machine we disabled had only been built 10 years prior by the very professor whose AI we met. The very same professor that made terrestrialization into usable energy via the Terra Orb. Yet the Violet book documents encounters with Paradox Pokemon and terrestrial crystals around 200 years before our journey. And the crater as a whole is said to be over 1 million years old. So the true origin of Paradox Pokemon and the Terrestrial phenomenon are far from clear as of now. This does beg the question, could we see a new form of Zygarde as the third major legendary of these games? Or could Diancie perhaps see a major role in these events? Oddly enough, most Pokemon move pools have also been adjusted to no longer learn Scald, making it a signature move of Volcanion, another Kalos legend that never really got its spotlight in the games. Could this be another hint towards major Kalos involvement in these upcoming adventures?
Oh yeah, it's all coming together.
And could we perhaps even see a return of the Mega Evolutions after years of waiting? That one in particular may be a bit of a biased hope, as I personally dearly miss the feature originating in Gen 6 and would be really happy if it could potentially make a return. However, given that nothing of the sort has been data mined so far, does make this less likely than the fairly reasonable claim that Kalos will play a relevant role in the future of this game. But I'll keep hoping. After all, it would be odd to actively include parts of Kalos without any trace of the ever-prominent mega phenomenon widespread across the region. And even the Paradox form of Salamence, Roaring Moon, heavily resembles and references this special kind of evolution found in specific regions. This is honestly the best shot at getting back Megas in a while, so I'll take all of these hints and see how it turns out. But regardless, I'm having a very fun time theorizing about this mysterious DLC, with high hopes for it to actually deliver on all of these hints and theories. And you know, maybe even performance improvements, if that isn't too much of a reach.
Daring today, aren't we?
So after getting all of that off of my chest, let me give you the TLDR, aka the conclusion. Pokémon Scarlet and Violet is a very different type of Pokémon game, with a lot of potential in its ideas. The transition to a full open world, allowing for unrestricted travel and modular story progression, makes everyone's playthrough a very unique experience, and allows different kind of players to prioritize different kinds of activities. The game has a surprisingly solid story with more mysteries still waiting to be uncovered. However, all of these positives are unfortunately plagued by technical problems and performance issues, making many potentially fun adventures more tedious and annoying than they should be.
So good and tasty?
Due to the rigorous holiday deadline, this game has gotten way less polish than it should have.
Stop it. Get some help.
And subsequently squanders a lot of its own potential. To add insult to injury, the first shown patches prioritize fixing glitches that players must knowingly go out of their way for in order to abuse, like the duplication glitch.
Stop right there, criminal scum!
Instead of improving the numerous issues that haunt almost every player in a casual playthrough. And looking back at similar issues in Gen 8, it is likely that these problems will not be fixed quickly, if at all. So, is this game fun? Honestly, yeah. It has a ton of new ideas and crazy stuff that has a lot of potential. And that's precisely what annoys me so much about this game. The potential to be such a big milestone for the franchise as a whole. Yet so much of it is wasted on this half-baked tech demo of a game, with no good reason behind it either.
What the hell is this?
Nintendo is certainly not short on money and has to rush these titles. If I may remind you, we are talking about the franchise that outclasses Star Wars and Mickey Mouse in revenue. Also, what exactly happened here? Anyway, let me continue the previous thought here. Is this game fun? Yes. Does it have the quality to justify a $60 price tag? Hardly. And is it an appropriate showcase of what one of the most premier entertainment franchises can do after over 2 decades of experience? Absolutely not. Of course none of this really matters, as it is Pokémon and the game broke sales records immediately. But this time I can't complain too much about it, because I'm part of the problem. And I'm less annoyed by it as well, because contrary to these two bland copy and paste failures, this game actually has a lot of good points to it. I just wish the game wouldn't actively obstruct me from enjoying those things by frequently failing to showcase them in any quality above 5 FPS slow-mo with X-ray vision. So would I recommend the game? I don't know. I can't really tell you with a straight face that you're getting a high-quality experience fitting for a full-price title. But I also have to admit that I've had a decently fun time. Maybe wait for some patches or for the price to go down a bit if you want a good deal. It's somewhat conflicting to give a clear recommendation on this game, as it very clearly abuses the privilege of being a Pokémon game in order to get away with a very subpar performance. But the changes of Legends Arceus and this new generation do show that there is still some creativity and the intent on pushing this franchise forward behind it. If you're already a Pokémon fan, you're probably gonna have a good time.
What is that?
But if you're on the lookout for an objectively good game in a vacuum, this one might be a bit off. So let's put it like this. It's a fun game as it stands, yet you will be constantly reminded that it could be much better. And if you're like me, then that reminder can and will be a detrimental annoyance. Should you play it? You decide. Once the DLC hits, I might make a follow-up video on all of this, mostly because I enjoy talking about video game stories. And if Mega Evolution comes back, there's absolutely another video coming. But that's all the rambling I got for now. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and if you've actually listened all the way to this point, thank you very much for your attention. That being said, see you next time.